40 feet per second. That's how fast Britain's most expensive Jeep delivery system slammed its first cargo straight into the dirt like a lawn dart made of military stupidity. Welcome to the bunker. I'm Professor Von Blunder, and today we're talking about Hajile, the rocket-powered cargo drop system that Britain spent years perfecting, only to discover it had one tiny flaw. Everything landed upside down. Picture this. It's World War II. The British Army has a problem. They need to drop heavy cargo from aircraft, jeeps, guns, supplies, the usual. But here's the catch. They want it to fall fast. Really fast. Why? Because slow parachutes drift off target and give the enemy plenty of time to shoot your floating jeep out of the sky. So the army walks into DMW, Britain's Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, and says, "We need to drop stuff fast without parachutes." And DMWD, in a stroke of absolute genius, says, "What if we just let it fall like a rock and blast it with rockets at the last second?" Brilliant. Here's the plan. You take whatever you want to drop, a jeep, a cannon, a very confused soldier, and you strap it into a harness surrounded by a massive ring of rockets. They called it a candelabra, like a fancy chandelier. Except instead of holding candles, it's holding enough explosives to level a building. The idea was simple. The whole contraption falls freely through the air, hurtling toward the ground at terminal velocity. And then, just a few feet before impact, all the rockets fire at once, decelerating the platform so powerfully that it gently kisses the earth like a feather made of high explosives. In military engineering terms, that means they built a giant chandelier of explosives and hoped physics would be polite. They named it Hajile. Now, before you go throwing jeeps out of airplanes, you probably want to test the concept. So Bruce and Robertson, the engineers in charge, started with something simpler, a giant block of concrete. They flew a Lancaster bomber over the sea and shoved the concrete slab out the door, wrapped in its rocket harness. First test, 4 rockets. The concrete hit the water like a brick thrown by an angry god. Not great. Second test, 8 rockets. This time Hajile worked perfectly. The slab hurtled down, the rockets fired, and it slid gently beneath the waves like a synchronized swimmer made of stone. Success. The theory worked. They were so confident they offered to demonstrate the system by dropping something from a tree in Hyde Park. You know, casual rocket science in central London. What could go wrong? Now, if someone asked you to solve the problem of dropping a jeep from a plane, would you immediately think, let's surround it with rockets? Because that's exactly what they did. But here's the problem. Jeeps are hard to get. Especially when you tell the supply officer you plan to throw them out of an airplane at 2,000 feet. Shockingly, people were reluctant to hand over vehicles for this purpose. But eventually, Robertson convinced someone, and the real trials began. The first Jeep drop was scheduled for a bitterly cold winter day. Great start. First, the aircraft refused to start. Then, it started snowing heavily, which is bad news when your entire system depends on rocket fuses that don't like moisture. But they pressed on anyway because nothing says good decision-making like launching a rocket-powered experiment in a snowstorm. They finally got the plane in the air, flew to the drop zone, and shoved the Jeep out the door. And then, nothing. The rockets didn't fire. Not a single one. The Jeep, attached only to a tiny pilot parachute, plummeted to the ground at 40 feet per second and smashed into the earth with a shattering crash. Jeep number 1, obliterated. 2 weeks later, they tried again. This time, they added way more rockets. The Jeep dropped. The rockets fired. The vehicle survived the fall, relatively undamaged. Victory. Except when the smoke cleared, they found the Jeep lying on its roof, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. In tactical terms, that means the Jeep decided to audition for the gymnastics team instead of landing right side up. They went back to the drawing board. They designed a special crash pan to absorb the impact. They adjusted the rocket angles. They recalculated the timing. They dropped another Jeep. It flipped. They dropped another. Also flipped. In engineering terms, that means they added a crash pan, recalculated everything, and the Jeep still said, "No, I prefer handstands." Drop 1. Total failure. Jeep pancaked. Drop 2. Jeep flipped. Drop 3. Also flipped. Drop 4. You guessed it. Upside down. Imagine you're the engineer watching your months of work cartwheel through the air and land on its roof. Again, now to truly understand what this experience was like, I had Private Timmy strap himself into a Hajile demonstration rig here in the bunker. Timmy, ready? 3, 2, 1. And there he goes. Free fall, rockets fire, and he's upside down. Perfect somersault. Timmy, you all right? Timmy is not all right. He's dangling upside down. His helmet's fallen off, and I think he's concussed. This is exactly what happened to every single Jeep Britain tried to drop. So what happened to Hajile? Well, Britain spent years developing it, burning through budgets and Jeeps, and by the time they finally got it working properly, the war was almost over. It never saw combat, not once. All those rocket tests, all those somersaulting Jeeps, all for nothing. Time for the stupidity meter. Money wasted, years of development, multiple destroyed Jeeps, countless rockets, and a Lancaster bomber on standby. That's a solid 9 out of 10. Enemies killed? 0. Didn't even make it to the battlefield. 0 out of 10. Collateral damage to Timmy. He's still upside down, possibly concussed, definitely dizzy, and I think he's seeing double. 10 out of 10. Overall stupidity rating, 9 out of 10. Hajile earns its place in the bunker of blunders as the cargo delivery system that delivered everything except results. If you had millions of pounds in 1944, what stupid weapon would you invent to drop cargo? Let me know in the comments. And someone please flip Timmy back over. He's been upside down for 3 hours and he's starting to turn purple.